Debate. The Honourable Member for Churchill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow my colleague, the newly elected member from Victoria, who I know has a proud history of work with Aboriginal people, and it's certainly a pleasure to work with him in this House. It's an honour for me to rise here today to speak to an NDP motion, our motion, a motion that truly reflects the principles of the NDP, and a motion that also truly serves as a test for this government. This Opposition Day motion, put forward by my colleague, the member for Nanaimo-Cowichan, and supported by all of us, really goes beyond the day-to-day actions of this House and the day-to-day debates of this House, and it gives the chance to this House, to the government, to other opposition parties to stand with us and recognize that we need to change course, that Parliament needs to change course, and that First Nations, Métis and Inuit people deserve better from this Parliament. We are recognizing that the broad-based demand for action, and that is something that is fundamental to who we are as New Democrats. Recognizing that the people that have started Idle No More, that have been part of the rallies, that have been part of the flash mob round dances, that have been part of the workshops and information sessions, that have been out here to Parliament demanding meetings with ministers and, of course, with the Prime Minister, are saying that things need to change. I'm also honoured here to rise as the MP for Churchill in support of this motion. I have the pleasure of representing 33 First Nations across northern Manitoba and many Métis communities. I come from a vibrant part of Canada with tremendous diversity, with a very rich history and tremendous opportunity. But there is no question that the challenges that we face in the north are tremendous. And those challenges are even greater and extreme for many Aboriginal people in northern Manitoba. Aboriginal people in northern Manitoba and across Canada face extreme levels of poverty, high unemployment. In my constituency alone, 42% of people, Aboriginal people, have less than a high school diploma. And many of them live in conditions that can only be characterized as third world. In fact, we know at the international level, First Nations in Canada are rated 63rd on the United Nations Human Development Index. And that reality isn't just in numbers, but can be seen clearly if one visits any of the First Nations in northern Manitoba and so many across Canada, where you visit substandard housing with 10, 15, 20, and over 20 people sharing one home because there is inadequate housing. People that succumb to illness, like the basic flu, in much greater numbers because there is no running water in their communities. Young people that reach the point of wishing to take their own lives, and many, unfortunately, whom we lose to suicide because they feel they have no hope and nothing to live for. So many people from communities that unfortunately fall through the cracks and end up in the correctional system, making it so that Canada has some of the highest rates of Indigenous people in its correctional system, disproportionate to the number of Indigenous people in Canada. This, as many of us know, is the result of a dark history of colonization and oppression. But unfortunately, government after government at the federal level has not managed to break free and chart a new course. And despite promises to do the opposite, have in fact shown through their actions that they are willing to continue the paternalistic, colonialist relationship that has been around for so long. And one need not look any further than the last few years in this Parliament. The Prime Minister of Canada rose and gave an apology some years ago for the atrocity that was the residential school experience. I remember being at the offices of the Manitoba, Kiwetinawi, Okimakanak, the head office of the Northern Chiefs, and sharing with so many people that were moved, survivors, families of survivors, non-Aboriginal people as well, that were moved by this apology, an apology that I'm proud our late leader, Jack Layton, helped realize. But instead of truly standing to those words of changing course and bringing in a new, committing to a new relationship with Aboriginal people, with First Nations, Métis and Inuit people, this government did more of the same. We saw Bill C-38 and Bill C-45 most recently come up with a tremendous attack on treaty rights when it comes to First Nations people and Aboriginal rights more broadly. We saw a lack of consultation along the way, every step along the way, and particularly when it comes to control over treaty lands and the lands that Aboriginal people hold title to. We saw that Aboriginal people's voices, despite our constitutional responsibility to do so, were silenced, were ignored by this Conservative government. And one wishes that that was the end of the story. But the last few years, we have seen unprecedented cuts to organizations, to institutions that truly speak on behalf and with Aboriginal people. I'd like to mention some of those. Sisters in Spirit, the First Nations Statistical Institute, the National Aboriginal Healing Foundation, the National Centre for First Nations Governance, the Assembly of First Nations, Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami, Native Women's Association, the National Aboriginal Health Organization, Paktutit Inuit Women of Canada, and the list goes on. And most recently in the fall of 2012, we heard that tribal councils and Aboriginal political organizations, like in my region, the Keewatin Tribal Council, the Swampy Cree Tribal Council, MKO, SCO, the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, will be cut disproportionately. These, Mr. Speaker, are the voices of Aboriginal people. These are institutions that look out for housing, look out for education, advocate on behalf of communities, that work in conjunction with band councils, and that fight for Aboriginal communities that are often in many cases, remote and don't have a voice at the table. But, Mr. Speaker, the other side of this coin is that First Nations, Métis and Inuit people have had enough. And there is no better example than the last few months in our country where we have witnessed what is singularly one of the most historic events when it comes to the Aboriginal people and their leadership in recent history. We have seen an unprecedented approach to fighting back against this government. Yes, through the Idle No More movement. Yes, through the leadership that and the courage that many leaders have taken. And yes, through the immense sacrifice. And I want to take my speech today as a moment to recognize two people that I can call friends. Grand Elder Raymond Robinson of Pimachikamak Cree Nation, who along with Chief Teresa Spence joined with her on Victoria Island to commit to a hunger strike in order to call the federal government to action. And Wilson Hardy from Nissachawasset Cree Nation, who also was on a hunger strike, calling for the Prime Minister to act. These two men, their families and their communities took a stand, and these two men made an ultimate sacrifice, asking all of us to act. I also want to recognize the organizers of Idle No More in my home community in Thompson, Lisa Courier, Clint Soto, Val Charlotte, and the many people that helped to raise awareness and to work with young people who said we've had enough. Mr. Speaker, our Opposition Day motion today reflects those voices and said that not only should the budget of 2013 commit to economic outcomes for First Nations, Inuit and Métis people, but that this government needs to commit to action on treaty implementation and full and meaningful consultation on legislation that affects the rights of Aboriginal Canadians. This has gone on long enough, and we have a chance to stand with Aboriginal people across this country and make history, to chart a new course, a course that respects the treaties, a course that would truly honor the anniversary of the Royal Proclamation of 250 years that we're celebrating this year. A chance to do much better, a chance to show the international community that in a country as wealthy as Canada, its First Peoples must live in dignity. And before I end off, I want to share the words that both Wilson and Raymond shared with me on many occasions. They said to me, "I'm doing this for my children and my grandchildren. I'm not doing it for politics or for attention. I'm doing it for things to change. I want to thank them, and in their words, in their honor, I would like to ask this government and this Parliament to finally change course, to support our Opposition Day motion, and commit to building a better day with Aboriginal peoples in Canada. Kinanas commitment, miigwech.